all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and today we're going to talk about a person that some people call the queen of serial killers. Yep, Aileen Wournos. Aileen was born on February 29th, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan, to teenage parents Diane Wournos and Leo Dale Pittman. She had a brother that was 11 months older than she was, named Keith. Leo was a child molester who was committed to a mental institution in Kansas before eventually committing suicide. By all accounts, she was treated poorly as a baby, reportedly abandoned by Diane, found by grandmother Lori at 6 months old in an attic, covered in flies. Aileen was adopted by her grandparents Lori and Britta Wournos at age 4. Per Aileen, she reported that her grandmother was into Jesus, very clean type. Grandfather was stringent but good. He was a sergeant in the army and very moral. However, all other sources, including Aileen later on, would report that the home was just as abusive as her mother's was. There were rumors of incest also occurring. If Aileen did anything that Britta didn't like, he would lock her in a sauna and turn the heat on for extended periods of time. He called her worthless and told her that she shouldn't have been born. Starting at age 11, she learned that she could sell her body to get things that she wanted, which included cigarettes. At age 14, her grandmother died from liver cirrhosis. At 15, Aileen got pregnant and gave birth to a child that was immediately given up for adoption. Some allegations report Keith may have been the father, as they had kind of a weird relationship, while others suggest that it was the result of her sex work. And still more sources report it was the result of a rape. Again, varying reports indicate that after she got pregnant, her grandfather kicked her out of the home and made her live in the woods, while others report that she ran away and ended up having to go to Adrian's training school for 6 months after she was caught. According to a childhood friend, Dawn Botkins, Aileen had a horrible childhood. She stated that after her grandmother died, she was abandoned. Her older brother and potentially another sister stayed in a house, whereas Aileen was out in the woods, living in a broke-down car at the end of a driveway. She was homeless. She was raped, resulting in a child. Aileen again reported that after being in training school, she did leave Michigan. She hit the road for almost 4 years nonstop. Aileen reported being raped more than 30 times at this time, hitchhiking, and beginning hooking. This is her words. First, Aileen did go to Colorado. 2 years later, she was arrested for driving under the influence and disorderly conduct when she discharged her .22 pistol. After that, she moved south, reaching Daytona Beach, and got a job at a hotel. By this time, it was 1976, and she was 20 years old. She had a couple of relationships, saying the men were mothers, boys, or toxic, and she even thought about killing herself several times at this time, saying she fell in love with a man named Louis Gretz, a 69-year-old at one point. She got married to him, but reports show that she beat him with his own cane, causing him to get a restraining order and file for an annulment 2 weeks after they said "I do." In the same year, she was notified that Keith died of throat cancer. His life insurance paid out $10,000 to her, and she bought guns, cars, and numerous hotel stays, going through the new money in weeks. But she seemed to get used to the lifestyle and started committing armed robberies. In 1981, she was arrested for robbing a convenience store and taking off with $35 and a pack of cigarettes, for which she spent a year in jail. Over the next 10 years, she would be arrested multiple times for things like driving under the influence, assault and battery, and more robbery. In 1984, the 28-year-old moved to the Keys, reportedly stating she wanted to be a quote-unquote beach bum. It was then that she met a woman named Toni and had her first female relationship. They were together for approximately a year when Toni left, according to Aileen. When Toni left, Aileen went back to Daytona, and this is in 1986, and that's when she met Tyria Moore. The two started dating shortly after. Aileen and Tyria were regulars at the Last Resort bar there. The owner said that Aileen was sometimes likened to a bully of others when she wanted another beer, demanding that other patrons get her one rather than asking. In order to provide for Tyria, Aileen reported that she continued sex work and other petty crimes. On November 30th, 1989, something changed. 51-year-old Richard Mallory picked up Aileen, the owner of an electrical repair shop. He had been divorced for years and never really hid the fact that he would pay for the services of sex workers. That evening, the two started drinking together in his car, and at some point the two engaged in a fight, and as a result, Richard was shot 4 times with a revolver. Aileen dumped his body, stole his camera and radar detector, and pawned them. Richard was found 2 weeks later, but his body was decomposed, leaving little physical evidence. 6 months later, Aileen was back out on the prowl. On May 19th, 1990, Aileen is picked up by 43-year-old David Spears off of I-75. As they moved to a secluded area, David parked the car and began to undress. This is when Aileen got out of the car, went around to the driver's side, picked up her gun, and shot David 6 times. David was seen leaving work, headed to meet up with his ex-wife. So when he didn't show, his son called him in as a missing persons. David's car was found off the shoulder of I-75 with a flat tire. Next to the car in the weeds was his license plate that Aileen had thrown out. It wouldn't be until almost 2 weeks later that David's body was found in the Citrus County, just off the highway. On May 31st in Pasco County, Florida, 40-year-old Charles Carskadune picked up Aileen, about 30 minutes north of Tampa. The two found a remote location, and just like David, as Charles began to undress, Aileen got out of the car, went to the driver's side, and fired. This time she shot Charles 9 times. Aileen then stole his car and possessions and took off. She dumped Charles a few miles off the highway. A week later, on June 7th, Aileen was back on I-75. This time, 65-year-old Peter Sims picked her up. Peter was a Christian missionary and was on a road trip to New Jersey. He had Bibles in his car in order to pass out as he went there. Most believe that he was not picking her up for sex. Still, Aileen got in the car and ended up killing Peter. His car was found a month later on July 6 in the Ocala National Forest, 50 miles west of Daytona Beach. This time Aileen left evidence behind. See, in July 1990, Aileen and Tyria were living in a hotel in Daytona Beach off the money Aileen was getting from robbing these men. They wanted to go see fireworks at the beach and took Peter's car, which was still in Eileen's possession at the time, and began driving. As they were driving, they saw a sign for an Indian reservation, and Tyria wanted to go and attempted to turn, but was going too fast. She went off the road. The car went up on its passenger side, causing the carburetor to flood, and couldn't be restarted. The two women took off on foot. Witnesses to the event called the crash into police, which is how the vehicle was located. Peter has never been found. In the car, police noted the license plate was removed and the driver's seat was all the way forward. Numerous pawn shop tickets were found as well. They took those to the shop and found items from other murder victims there. They also noted a palm print on the driver's side door. From the stolen items recovered at the pawn shops, multiple fingerprints were identified, all of which eventually identified as belonging to Aileen Wournos, easily, because she had a pretty extensive criminal record. But before everything came together, Aileen stayed out, hunting men. On July 30th, 1990, 50-year-old Troy Burress picked up Aileen Wournos. Troy was a delivery man, and after making his run, he headed back to Daytona when he picked up Aileen. Again, they went to a secluded location, and he was shot twice and dumped. 5 days later, on August 4th, Troy was found in the Ocala National Forest. He was dumped off the side of a back road and noted to have 2 bullet wounds. His truck was found 8 miles away, abandoned at a secluded intersection. Steve Binagar, captain with Marion County Sheriff's Office in Ocala, Florida, became in charge of criminal investigations. A month later, on September 12, 1990, 56-year-old Charles Dick Humphreys was the next victim. Dick got out of the car, and so did Aileen. When they got close to each other, Aileen ended up shooting him 7 times. He staggered a few feet before falling down as he succumbed to his injuries. Captain Vinegar believes these cases were related, and as such, he put out a fax blast to all other agencies to see if they had any similar crimes. The response is immediate. Citrus, Pasco, Dixie, Felucia, and it all had at least one person that matched the MO. All white, middle-aged men, all taken as secluded locations and shot with a .22. Many were at close range. 7 men in total. Some scenes recovered used condoms, and one recovered a blonde hair, leading them to believe they were looking for a woman. By the winter of 1990, a task force was created to solve these cases, but still Aileen hadn't been caught yet. On November 19, 1990, 62-year-old Walter Gino Antonio was shot 4 times and his car stolen. 5 days later, his car was found abandoned. The task force put together went back to the open missing person case of Peter, going back to a place where they had eyewitnesses of 2 women seen in his car. The people who saw them gave a pretty good description, and from that, a composite sketch was created of both women and went out to the public immediately. Within an hour, multiple calls came in naming Aileen and Tyria, many of which disclosed that they frequented biker bars in the Daytona area. Undercover police were sent out to many of the bars, finding her, eventually, at her favorite watering hole. She was spotted at the Last Resort bar on January 9, 1991. She got called out of the bar and immediately arrested by police. The heat was also on Tyria, who eventually turned to witness in order to ensure her own immunity. Here, she agreed to have her phone calls recorded to convince Aileen to confess. And on January 16, 1991, Aileen also confessed to detectives for all 7 of the murders. On January 13, 1992, Aileen went to trial for the murder of Richard Mallory first. At trial, Aileen claimed rape and sodomy. She said that she had rubbing alcohol poured into her anus and nose. Years after the trial concluded, she stated she lied about the sodomy, but not the rape. In this trial, a few oddities occurred. First, prosecution was allowed to bring in her other charges, even though she hadn't been convicted. Probably one of the only cases where this was allowed, and they used something called the Williams Rule. Second, the first judge on the case was dismissed because she reported she was going to give Aileen a fair trial. Third, prosecution hid evidence that Richard Mallory did in fact have a previous rape case against him in the past, provided by one of his exes. And so, as this trial goes on and Aileen is talking about the reason for the murder, she ends up getting into some of the other murders as she's talking. She says that Spears had a lead pipe in her hand, assaulting her, and so she killed him as well. The next man was on drugs, and Aileen simply got annoyed and disgusted and killed him. She said she was so drunk she didn't even know half of what was going on. Aileen's trial ended on January 27, 1992, and unsurprisingly, she was found guilty and sentenced to death. After that, she actually ended up pleading guilty to 5 other counts of first-degree murder for which she received the death sentence for each man that she killed in November of 1992. Deirdre Hunt was fellow inmate on death row, and she stated Aileen wasn't mentally well. She said it's hard to imagine killing someone who wasn't fully there, and that was Aileen. In July 2001, Aileen ended up giving up all of her appeals. She went in front of a judge and reported that she killed and robbed those men, that she did it cold, and she'd do it again, that she has hate crawling through her system, and she just wanted to be put to death. Governor Jeb Bush signed her death warrant. On October 9, 2002, Aileen's sentence was carried out at 9:47 a.m. via lethal injection. She was the 3rd female to be executed in the state of Florida. And that ends the case of Aileen Wournos, the queen of female serial killers. To all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.